Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Adam.
You can hear me now.
Yes, we do.
Ah, good. Okay, great. We'll go audio now, Bridget. So we'll turn off our cameras and we'll start. I had an issue with my Safari, so I went back on my phone. Great. Okay,
Oh,
wonderful. So we have a new interface, which is good. Nice to see you. Good morning. Good afternoon, sorry.
good morning.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. Where are you guys today?
I'm in California, so this
Ah,
is indeed
oh
morning
my goodness. Okay. Happy holidays in California.
to you as well.
Well, thank you,
I,
everybody. How about you? Are you in London today?
I'm in Italy.
No, no, I'm
Um,
in.
Okay, we're all over the world, basically, is where we are. That's incredible. Okay, Tess, how's our sound quality? Everything is good? Okay. Bridget and Emanuela, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
yes, can you?
Yeah, that's great. This is good. Okay, great. I'm going to start in a couple minutes. Just going to wait. Okay. Going to wait 1 minute
Hello,
or two,
Lina.
please. Hi, Lena. Okay. I like to start on time, but it's a bit different format. I see some people in LinkedIn that are checking in. Just one moment. All right, 1 minute and we'll start. Thank you, Tess. Okay, 30 seconds. Just so you know, we have a couple of streams going at the same time. We're trying to add, this part is not being recorded, obviously, but we're going to add Twitter and YouTube, which is nice, but primarily this is a LinkedIn format that we're streaming on to their LinkedIn Live. So that's good. Okay.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lena, for joining. Must be beautiful in Switzerland. Okay. Welcome to the Family Business Audiocast on LinkedIn. I am Adam Smith, creator of this Audiocast series, and a warm thank you and happy holidays to our live audience today on LinkedIn and Restream, and for any of those listening in the future. I'm very pleased to introduce our guest today from California and Italy. We have Bridget Kustin and we have Emanuela Rondi, and it's really wonderful, Bridget, to have you here, and also Emanuela.
Thanks, Adam. It's great to be here. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here too.
Thank you both, and also our friend Alfredo Damascus, who introduced us. That was very nice of him, and our former guest as well on the show. So I'm going to share a bit about you, and then we'll dig into a conversation for about 20, 30 minutes. First, about you, Bridget. Bridget is a economic anthropologist and a senior research fellow at Oxford Sayed Business School, where she directs the Ownership Project 2.0. We'll talk about that today. It is a global research initiative examining how family offices and private capital owners can scale their impact to address global challenges. With an extensive fieldwork across 12 countries, her research delves into the influence of very large family business owners on their enterprises, focusing on responsible ownership and stakeholder relationships. Bridget is also a former Fulbright Scholar to Bangladesh and National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellow. She has consulted also for organizations such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and served on the World Economic Forum's Global Futures Council for Development Finance. That's amazing. Emanuela is an associate professor in management at the University of Bergamo, specializing in the intersection of family businesses and social capital, particularly how family external relationships impact succession and also innovation dynamics. Her research employs qualitative methods, including ethnography and case studies to explore organizational processes in these family firms. And she serves as the academic coordinator for the Next Generation Summit for the FBN International and chairs the research development program for the International Family Enterprise Research Academy. We'll be talking about that as well, and also FBN. We have some guests from FBN today on the show as well, and previously on the show. So today we'll explore the complexities of family enterprises, focusing on these issues that our guests cover: governance, succession, and the integration of social capital in fostering innovation and resilience. So Bridget, maybe a couple minutes from you of what you're up to today, what you're focusing on, would be wonderful. And the same with Emanuela, please.
Sure. Thanks again for having me. It's an early morning in California, so it's a great way to start the day by hearing an accounting of the things that I've done in the past that have worked out well.
Congratulations.
No, it's a great start to the day. So the ownership project at the Said Business School at the University of Oxford really got its start from a significant grant from the Ford Foundation when we were focusing on families that had large operating businesses with revenue above $1 billion a year. And the question was, are families, broadly speaking, more responsible owners than non-families? And we thought that that was an important question to ask because families, if they're not running listed companies, are private. They're usually under no obligation to reveal much of anything. And so, beyond anecdotes, beyond the extensive coverage of family owners in film, literature, television, there isn't a ton of global data looking at the large family business owning demographic. And what we found when we used both quantitative methods and then the qualitative methods, which I led, was that there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between a very positive story that families tell themselves about the kinds of owners that they are, and then what the data actually shows in terms of, for example, ESG performance, environment, social, and governance performance, where we found that families were not the best in class, and that institutionally owned, government owned, even private equity owned businesses seem to perform better in terms of certain social responsibility metrics. And so that really has set up a question that the Ownership Project continues to grapple with, which is what's the disconnect between the stories people tell themselves about themselves versus what the data actually shows? And so we're still tackling that. And what has changed with this new iteration of the ownership project is that we're no longer looking at operating businesses, but we're looking at family-led investable assets wherever they sit. That could be the investable assets of a family office. It could be the family's private wealth that's managed by the CFO of their operating business. It could be the endowment of a family foundation. It could be, and this is common for so many of the large families, what's happening in the holding company where the sum of family affairs has an administrative home. And the other thing that's different is that we've now really put our cards on the table because we have impact in our title. So our study is not completely neutral. We're interested in the sense that we're looking at how families think about big problems, tackling global issues, using the resources at their disposal. So that's the 30,000 foot overview of what's going on in the ownership project, and it continues to be a privilege to be let into the private spaces of families and their boards and their businesses and their family offices. And that's just what it means to be an anthropologist. You're constantly party crashing in essence and asking permission to listen in and be a fly on the wall. And it's a continual sort of privilege and surprise that families will often say yes. And I think that's because they can understand intuitively that there is an importance to not just necessarily replicating positive stories, but digging deeper and seeing what might be going on.
That's wonderful. That's an incredible project, and I look forward to talking more about it with you in the new year as it evolves. I'm myself involved in some activities in a single family office, but also a broader values and impact system with an effort in Europe, and also looking at the same issues you're facing you're attending to in the Family Enterprise program at Columbia Business School. So we'll definitely talk more about that and see if we can find ways to support each other.
Absolutely,
Thank you for that.
absolutely. I'll be hitting you up for an interview.
Emanuela, you've had your coffee already, so thank you, Bridget, for early riser. We're going to move over to Italy now.
Yes, exactly. Here is afternoon, so I already had lunch as well. And I should be awake somehow. On this side of the world, I'm working on the aspect of family business and family offices, but more in general, what we call as entrepreneurial families, by understanding how the different organizations through which they deal with business interests, but also philanthropic interests and legacy aspects are coordinated by entrepreneurial families, and how they are designing what we call the entrepreneurial family galaxy, so the constellations of different organizations through which they deal with their interests in order to allocate the different goals, coordinate among family members different interests, and also understanding how this galaxy could be a good way for engaging more with next generations in order to allow them to decide not just whether or not they want to contribute to the family business, but understanding how they can contribute to the development of the entrepreneurial family galaxy. And according to this view, the idea is that by being a family member, you are basically a key stakeholder of the family, and you need to understand what role you want to play and how you can contribute to the development of the entrepreneurial family over time in order to thrive across generations. And for doing so, we are investigating multi-generational families. I'm especially interested in families with long traditions and strong legacies, to explore how they've been able to bring it to the present, and also how they are structured in order to prosecute it, in order to bring it forward to the future.
Wonderful. That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. And I'm particularly interested in the focus on the innovation, entrepreneurial, technological elements of the family enterprise. It's particularly important right now in the advent of AI and also the simultaneous generational movement into G2 and G3 with different type of mindsets around technology and entrepreneurship. It's quite tricky. So look forward to speaking about that together. I'll start a question for both of you. So you both have extensive experience in researching family businesses and wealth globally. Bridget, with your fieldwork in many countries on these large family businesses, and then Emanuela through your work on innovation, dynamics, and succession, in many different cultural contexts, of course. How do you feel that families are navigate this tension between trying to pursue excellence and best practices organizationally, but then also staying true to their values and their business and not just pursuing, let's say, capitalism for the sake of capitalism? So we'll start with Bridget first.
Thanks, Adam. I think it's important from our research to acknowledge the first distinction, which is there's really two types of families that we encounter. And this is something that comes up when writing the first, one of the first things you do when you're writing an academic article that's meant for a peer-reviewed publication is you have to write your methods section. And in your methods section, you have to describe the population that you study. And it's basics, right? Location, sector, commonalities. This can be one of the most challenging things to write because you can have a population that's split between those who live on airplanes, who have a multi-jurisdictional experience, and do that intentionally, right? For some, it might be a clear-cut case of tax strategy in terms of why they're domiciled where they are. For others, it can be much more complicated, linking to, for example, if the family was once fleeing a conflict or post-conflict situation, and there can be a sense of safety wrapped up in dispatching one family member to Canada, another to Switzerland, another to the UK, another to the US, right? The idea being, let's not have all of our eggs in one basket. So then how does one describe a family or acknowledge cultural specificity when for one or more generations they've been intentionally placed all across the globe? So there's that, and that's sort of a kind of, let's say, prototypical jurisdictional-less family that for whom culture will be a very complex construct because they might have been in these places, as I said, for more than one generation, versus a family that is super rooted in one place, the single small town in Germany, somewhere in the Midwest United States, where everyone in the town knows them, their legacy is strong, there's no question where they belong. Culture and cultural inheritances are going to be a much more straightforward proposition. So both of these families, or both of these types of families, constitute those that we study in our project. And again, we're very narrowly focused on the largest. So for our project, for our interviews, we set a threshold of $100 million in investable assets to participate in our interview or our case study, but our median is 2.2 billion. So we are on the upper end of the spectrum. So everything that I'm saying is specific to this very narrow, very large demographic on one end of the spectrum. It certainly doesn't cover the universe of all business owning families, all wealth holding families. So that's just again, a very sort of top line answer to the question of cultural is already fraught depending on who you're talking to.
Okay. Emanuela, can you talk about that distinction a bit, particularly from the European perspective of this, as I say, this pursuit of best practices, which is both, I guess, internally motivated in terms of, internal corporate excellence, but also externally from boards and, let's say the children or next generation going to business school, coming back and talking about doing this or that. But then there's this conflict between that and the original mission or legacy or the comfort factor of these large families sometimes that have already become successful.
Thanks, Adam, for the question. Also, according to what Bridget mentioned, your question raised me two key points. The first is that this tension between best practices and more like family dynamics is the tension that family business research has tried to address for the last 30 years in terms of how can family businesses manage the tension between family logics and business logics. And in this regard, it's important to acknowledge that the professionalization of businesses, especially my target is more like a smaller type of wealth, and also in terms of business largeness. I also study small and medium enterprises, so it's a little bit a different target from the Bridget's one. But here you can really see the difference between medium-large firms where this kind of managerialization has already taken place, and so they are maybe professionalized businesses where the family is not even involved but is just owning the business. And so also being an owner for them, being a responsible owner, is a role that requires totally different competencies. Whereas for smaller and becoming medium enterprises, there are much more family logics at place. And here, the transition and the organizational change is what is really at the core of the development of the family business. And by developing the organization, the family also evolves in terms of family governance, in terms of understanding the role that the family can play for the business. The second point that your question raised to me in terms of reflection is that for us as family business researcher, it has been a long time observing the organizational change. So how do organizations evolve? How do these managerial insights that we get from the business school are implemented in the business and in the organization? So how they become more structured. But so far, well, let's say until recently, we consider the family as something very static, as if the family is an institution that it has its own characteristics and with its own dynamics affect somehow the business. Nowadays, with the changes, the evolutionary changes that we have also in the family structures, in terms of modern families, as Bridget was mentioning, the fact that families are living in different places, and also what it means to be a family is changing a lot. We have second marriages, we have stepchildren. How does it change in terms of the effect that these family dynamics have on the business, and vice versa? So this is something that I think we need to investigate more and more. And as we consider the organizational change, we need to address also the family change and their co-evolution, whether they're able to co-evolve, or rather whether this evolution brings them in different directions, and therefore the business cannot be anymore a family business because of that. I think that this is something that research should dedicate more attention to.
And Emanuela,
Thank
you're
you.
absolutely... Oh, sorry, Adam, could I just respond to Emanuela, because I love
You
that
go,
point.
please.
This is exactly what our research is showing as well, is that the heterogeneity, the difference that exists among families, means that what we see in our interviews is that the idea of best practices itself is a bit of a chimera. It doesn't really seem to exist. Because we're studying the largest families who can afford the top advice from the top providers, one would think that there would actually be a kind of uniformity in topics like family governance, or having a family constitution, or a family council, or how things are structured. But we see exactly the opposite. We see that even among the largest families, fourth generation and beyond, they have completely heterogeneous structures in terms of how they manage themselves. And it's because they do exactly what you said, Emanuela. They start with, well, what does our unique family look like? And then from there, they say, well, then what does that family need? Rather than what does, some kind of idea of a successful family in the abstract look like, and let's have that. It always starts from this bespoke point of, we need to have something that works from the family. Now, our sample is biased because we study the families that exist. We don't study those that were once, billionaire owners and then failed. And what that survivability bias suggests is that if I were to extrapolate from our data to make a claim, it would be that there is no such thing as a single best practice, right? Because the only thing that can be said across, and this observation is tied to our families that had operating businesses from the first phase of the project, that all that can really be said is that they're different from each other. It's not that there's a set of best practices that is observable across them.
Okay.
Sorry to jump in, Adam.
No, good. So it's important, as you're saying, culturally in today's global world to be open-minded and have awareness of the different mindsets of cultures, but also generations, right? And then what I was referring to earlier is this expansion of external advisors and boards and influences to the large families, which used to operate more in a bubble, in a sense, that they were sufficiently capable to operate their single operating company. But then as the family office construct becomes into place, it becomes more of a corporation, more of an organization. We can talk a bit more about that on our call today. Let's continue on the ownership project with you, Bridget. So Ownership Project 2.0, it explores how these offices can scale their impact, the family enterprise or the family office can scale their impact to address global challenges. So they're doing well, but they're also doing good, especially in climate, tech, infrastructure, energy, crossing over into ESG, of course. As an operator, as an investor, I guess, can you talk a bit about two items there? What is your biggest cultural challenge within businesses that may hinder them from leveraging this private capital at larger scale, moving into, let's say, good for you, good for society projects?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then secondly, as I was saying, how do you either advise or consult or encourage this effort to go beyond the wealth creation into more of the wealth legacy?
Sure. So I'll speak now from, as you said, the current phase of the ownership project focusing on family-led private capital, and I'll speak from the interviews, which, by the way, are still in progress. So absolutely, I'm recruiting for more families to speak to. Again, the criteria for participation is a minimum of 100 million US dollars in assets under management, and our median right now is 2.2. Apologies, I've been saying 2.2. I think it's 2.1 billion. And the single biggest barrier that the data shows so far is, without a doubt, loss aversion. So it doesn't matter how many assets there are, it doesn't matter how strong the returns are, there is loss aversion. Families do not want to lose money. And the human reasons behind this are what I find so interesting and speaks to my background as an anthropologist, and is something that I'll be diving into with the writing that I'm doing on this topic. But without a doubt, loss aversion is the single biggest driver between the choices that get made. And then what this means in terms of building legacy, and it is a need to reframe what legacy means. Because before, legacy was something that could be achieved either by a philanthropic project, putting your name on the side of a building and knowing that it'll be there for generations to come and form the, part of the kind of memory of a place. Or it could be legacy in the sense of this person or the family business or family office or the fund was incredibly successful, and that is going to be the source of the legacy for years to come. I think there is a need for families to really lean into, what would it mean to be the investor that drives a critical part of clean tech or green tech forward, and have that be one's legacy. I think an incredible example for families is the Jamil family of Saudi Arabia, who for many, many years supported something called the Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab at MIT, and funding academic research has got to be frustrating as a philanthropist because it's years before you actually receive any kind of results from good research. It can take so long. It really is a leap of faith. But the family kept funding this. They put significant resources into it. And then years later, what ends up happening? And we're talking years later, many, many years. The two economists who run this lab win the Nobel Prize in economics. What an incredible legacy for the family to know that their philanthropic resources changed knowledge as we know it, right? That's different than putting your name on the side of a building. And so I think that so to the second part of your question is how do we get families to change their behavior? The most powerful force for changing behavior that we've seen is peer learning. It's not a data-driven approach. It's not putting academic research in front of them. And so as a project, we're very mindful of this, which is why we have our Family Advisory Council, where we find family principals who are doing really interesting work and are willing to sort of be public, be on our website, and we put them in conversation with other families in strategic ways because getting families to hear this piece about legacy, I mean, it's not hearing it from me, Bridget, a random academic at Oxford that's going to make them change their minds. It's going to be an inspiring story from a peer. Um, Easier said than done, though, because academics are used to thinking that we're the smartest people in the room and it's our voices that matter. And so it's a strategic decision to say, no, when we convene a dinner of family principals, our headline speaker might not necessarily be an academic. It might be a family member who we think can really inspire.
I think one comment there on the academic front is that on the family business platform, last 2 years, this is our 37th episode, we've had about 45 guests, and actually I think about a third have been researchers, including some of your friends, Massimo Bao and Fredo Damasis, and then also Professor Matthew Hughes at Lancaster. So I've learned a great deal from them, and as of our thousands of listeners, it's been wonderful. I think it's important to include researchers because they come from a very particular point of view that's very deep. It might not be wide, but if one can pull together, spends the time to bridge the research and academic, more the tactical information, and then bridge that into the broader theoretical business approach, that's super valuable. So that's been great. Let's see.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, academics are critical to the conversation. You won't get me arguing against that. But I mean, in terms of influencing family behavior,
Yes.
that's where I think that there's a place to think strategically about who do families listen to, right, when they're making big decisions.
I'm also working on that myself intellectually and in terms of governance, being on boards and working on a family enterprise project myself in terms of values. So definitely I agree with you, and working on want to have a conversation with you in the coming weeks about that as well, including looking at the different value systems and family enterprise operations and styles between US and Europe are quite different still. Okay, Emanuela, let's see. On your side, your research highlights the impact of external relationships on innovation within family businesses and family enterprises. We've talked about external advisors on this show many times, including boards and councils and operating advisors and external CEOs. So I would like your thoughts on how you see these type of relationships redefining the competitive edge of family firms in general, but also talk a bit about the industries that are super innovative and dynamic, potentially technology, and how that's even more challenging.
Yes, so during my research on relationships in family businesses, also among family businesses and organizations in general, what I realize is that relationships and social capital are the real assets on which family business can develop their competitive advantage. This is because families are there to stay, And so they are able to develop relationships with organizational stakeholders, either they are customers, suppliers, other types of collaborators, advisors as well. And this way they can be reliable in terms of what they promise and also what they can deliver. And there is always this idea that if I speak with a family member who is also an owner, that means that project is going to happen. So there is this idea of having a face with whom to interact. And I realized that in innovation, this is particularly relevant because innovation is uncertain and very often it fails because there is not enough commitment about the organization to bring it to happen. Whereas in family businesses, maybe they are, according to research, longer in taking the decisions to commit to innovation, but once they decide, then they are much faster in implementing it. So this implementation phase, it's very important for family businesses, and having the family commitment or even having a family as a leader of the innovation project allows the organization to evolve towards change, so to innovate. And especially related to digital transformation and all these new technologies, we conducted with a team of co-authors a study on Industry 4.0, Industry 5.0, about the digital transformation of family businesses, manufacturing family businesses. And there we realized that the relationship between generations of the family, so the intergenerational relationships of family members who work in the business are crucial in bringing the transformation in the family business, meaning that the mentorship that senior generation can have on junior generations about specific knowledge, but also the digital knowledge and competencies that relate to the transformation that businesses needs to take, that belongs more to the junior generations, can act as a reverse mentorship for senior generations. So this is the best way through which family business can innovate, by relying on strong relationship between senior gen and next gen, and this way implementing change. We observe that when there is not this level of agreement about implementing innovation, so the innovation is driven only by one of the two, then it becomes hard to implement it, and the organization is stuck in a paralysis.
Wonderful. I like the reference to the reverse mentorship. It's helpful to look at it that way, and to empower the next generation. Not just involvement, but also mentorship upwards. It can be tricky when the business owners are their parents, and super successful people with strong egos and personalities. So I think I've seen this occur on boards and also in M&A contexts, where we've talked about this with some of our guests, such as Emily Bouchard and also Valerie Gonskaya from Merrill Lynch, and I think Lena Chahab as well, who's on the call, talked about this importance of communication and transparency, right, between the generations. So I think in order to extract that information holistically is making sure that the whole family ecosystem is open-minded. So both of you work closely with next generation business leaders. Obviously, Bridget on the ownership project focused on scaling impact, and then Emanuela, you mentor yourself, next generation leaders, through the NXG network. Can you both talk about that mentorship and what is the most critical skill for the rising gen to develop in order to carry their enterprises forward and drive towards that legacy?
Oh, I would say emotional intelligence, the ability to figure out how to have difficult conversations, how to become leaders within the family, how to position themselves within inevitable family disputes, and how to do all of this with with sensitivity and an awareness of where other people are coming from. Another commonality among the families that we speak to who aren't just doing well financially, but seem to be thriving as individuals is that they seem to genuinely like their family members, right? It's not a job to interact with them. And that is rarely something that happens without a lot of effort being put toward it, whether that is um, training and technical resources and external mediation, or processes led by consultants where the families learn thing about themselves and about the others through some kind of mediated process, or it's something as basic as having an open door policy and not having power, real or perceived, be overly concentrated in one individual, but there's a sense that people can
Hmm.
access each other and speak about difficult topics. And so, there's those are absolutely critical skills. I've been surprised to realize that so we don't focus on next gens formally
I
through the
understand.
project, but of course we meet them in the context of the research that we do, and often that will be the first person that I encounter at an event, and that will be someone that I get to know before an interview with their parent or uncle or aunt ever takes place. And it's been surprising to me to see how they can't always be champions of sustainability or innovative forward thinking, because if there are multiple next gens vying for control, there can be a real need to establish bona fides first to be taken seriously by the now gen or the principals. And if anything, that can lead to a kind of conservatism in position, a desire to say, no, no, I'm not beholden to ESG or something that might risk being seen as trendy by the current principles. And so, you know, I don't subscribe to the idea that next gens will save us or will save the world, because depending on the family, they can be pushed into these positions of, as I said, a kind of conservatism. So I think empowering next gens to find their voice, find their talents, develop that kind of confidence, um, and getting whatever degrees or qualifications that they might need to be taken seriously is
But not as
is
many,
is really
not as
critical. And of
many
course, that
degrees
depends
as,
on the age.
not as many degrees as you, though.
Well, no, no, what I mean by that is depending on the industry, depending on the family, certain forms of qualifications might matter. If it's, if there still is an operating business in a highly technical field, right? The ability to show the family that you're willing to, obtain mastery of that technical field in engineering or chemistry or whatever it might
Yeah.
be, that can matter. If one wants to go into impact-driven investment, then an advanced degree in something relating to impact measurement is a great way to show that you have these bona fides and that this isn't a passing interest. So no, I think that the point is that it's not about collecting degrees for the sake of it, but in order to then be able to tell the family, listen, this is, there's expertise on
Well,
the
I was
subject.
joking, but you're talking about the hard versus soft intelligence. So obviously both are really important. Um, and they also are different between the large companies and the small companies, because the small companies tend to guide themselves, I think, towards in a more competitive behavior, which is externally focused in our world, focused on the big company leaders, and the Elon Musk of the world are very motivating to bigger enterprises. But then the SMEs and, let's say, smaller businesses that are more mom and pops or entrepreneurs, it seems like they have a different mindset, and there's a bit more of that personal pride element. Emanuela, what do you have to say?
Yes, in terms of addressing your former question, I think that the main skill of the next gen, I agree with Bridget about emotional intelligence. I also think that next gen need to be able to have a long-term perspective. Very often, when the next gen takes a role in the family business, they are eager to show that they are capable, that they can manage things by themselves. This is also a way to show their parents or their relatives that they deserve the role that they got. However, they need to really think about the long terms in terms of their longer career, because the first step in doesn't mean that they will retain that role since for ages. So probably they enter into the family business with a role that might change over time. Very often I saw next gen that are kind of they want to be in a rush of getting a leadership role, but this needs to take its steps and also have a cohabitation with the senior gens in order to be able to play that role. And another element is to be able to think beyond immediate success in terms of personal gains and also for the business itself. So focusing on sustainability of the business, sustainability of the family with their presence in the organization, and also thinking about the long term for the family legacy. So also when the next gen comes in, they often want to change things very sudden, but maybe it takes time for them to understand why the organization is working in a specific way. So they are, as next gen, are normally very hectic and energetic, but having a long-term perspective means also being reflective and understanding the situation before trying to changing it. And I see that sometimes this is hard to grasp for next gen who want to show they deserve the place where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the last episode we spoke with Christina Wing at Wingspan Legacy and Marianne Bellman, Marianne Bell, her partner, and we talked a bit about this dynamic of pride within the companies and finding a way to embrace that pride and to avoid any sort of guilt, let's say, or hesitation to embrace the wealth creation. Could you just talk a bit about that briefly, and then we'll move on to some of our last comments, because I'm interested in not just the perspective of long-term thinking as a next generation, but also the way to have those communication tools within the families to encourage that long-term thinking both ways, to move away from the short-term profits and the immediate sense of capitalism within the companies, but thinking more longer term within the families.
So the first iteration of the ownership project, which focused on operating businesses, there was a really interesting finding in the interviews where, with my co-author, Mary Johnston Louis, we looked at how families actually spoke about time in the questions that we asked about their operating businesses. And we found that long term is sort of delightfully undefined, and that for many families, the operating businesses were not necessarily thinking beyond the typical planning cycles of a non-family owned business. And where we found there was an interest in long termism and a defined and a willingness to actually use numbers, right? And be really prescriptive about what is meant by taking a long term perspective, is when it came to the family's desire to remain owners or remain generationally wealthy. That's when people would start to talk about 22 to 24 years, right? The length of a generation, generational time. And the reason why this was a really interesting finding is because it suggests, Adam, that the most sort of urgent response to your question is to actually have to build in a bit of accountability. And okay, how do we build in accountability for a long-term perspective and long-term thinking? Well, the first step is to actually define it, right? We really do tend to use long-term as a term of art, whereas there's a need to start to have families hold themselves accountable for assigning a number to that. If they say that they're interested in long-term thinking with respect to an operating business, well, where does 22 to 24 years show up in your AGM, right? Is that really an active time frame that is acknowledged, used, and that shapes planning, right? Or is it used in a much more kind of loose and motivational way? If we really want to push people toward a long-term perspective, then perhaps there is a need to start to ask families to think about where actual numbers and timeframes do and do not show up, and not just use of the phrase long term.
If I can build up on that, in a research that we conducted a few years ago, we examined the temporality of family members, so their attitude toward time, and we observed that very often the role of advisors, more than managing the conflict itself, is to manage the different temporal orientations of family members of different generations. So next generation have an orientation toward time which differs from the one of a senior generation. Takes, for instance, the concept of future. What is future for a next gen is different for what is future for a senior generation. And therefore, the role of mediator is to find a synthesis and allow them to understand the other perspective, and also the concept of long term that they need to agree upon. And based on that, in our recent book, together with Alfredo De Massis, that we recently published, we examine especially the role of mediator in terms of managing the orientation that family members have toward the family wealth itself. So as Bridget was mentioning before, there is this concept of loss aversion, but you can be loss averse in different ways in terms of long term. You can be loss averse by being entrepreneurial, so you diversify your wealth investments in order to be entrepreneurial and mitigate the risks. But you can also be risk averse by being instead a custodian of your wealth. So it's like, I received this wealth from the 11th generation, I'm 12th generation, my role is to bring it to the 13th generation in the same way to give them the same opportunities. Both of these concepts can be considered as risk aversion, because you want to mitigate the risk somehow, but on one side you play these roles as an entrepreneurial family member, on the other one you play these roles as a custodian. So also the strategy that your family puts in place in order to manage its assets might differ, despite being everyone oriented toward the long term.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And just a brief moment to appreciate the book that you published with Professor Fred Damascus, my friend. Congratulations on the family business book, published by Pearson Financial Times recently, this past couple of months, actually. Really, really proud and happy to see that book. Congratulations to you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Adam.
So we'll wrap up with, we won't do any Q&A today. We'll keep it short for the holidays, but just one more item. Both of you are thinking about this this concept of success and looking beyond to legacy. I know we've talked about it in so many ways, but legacy is the most important topic for me personally within the family enterprise world, and bridging the generational approach to it and also the financial and non-financial approaches to it. So I'd love to end up on your own comments on legacy personally, and perhaps any sort of reference to a concept or a single family enterprise in the world that you admire in terms of their approach to legacy for the company and for the family.
Oh, what a big question, especially in the wake of holidays where I think everyone is reflecting on family and family dynamics. I think that the we get a lot of people who come through the project who say pretty clearly that they don't really start to think about legacy until they're near or at the end of their kind of typical working life. So late 60s, somewhere in the 70s. And I wonder what it might look like if there was a way we could shift that. And the question around legacy is something that starts much sooner to then inform what people do during their most productive working years in their 30s, 40s, 50s. It always makes me feel a bit sad when people only become reflective after a lifetime of having worked in directions that then they then decide they're not particularly proud of or feel inspired by or that they don't think reflects their legacy. And how can we start to, within families, normalize legacy as something that you just start to work toward from your 20s? Um, the question of what that legacy should be is not something that I feel particularly driven to be prescriptive on because it's too specific to the industry, too specific to the source of the wealth or how the family continues to generate the wealth. And something might not seem groundbreaking to an external,
Well, perhaps,
but within a family,
perhaps,
within their own
I mean,
situation.
that's really a brilliant way to say it. Perhaps uh, the light there for the next generation would be more wide.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I now confess that I forget the second part of your question.
The second part meaning,
You
do you
asked
have
about
a
legacy.
particular concept or a particular company that really draws your admiration?
Oh, yes. The one that I mentioned before, the the family, the descendants of Abdul Latif Jamil, um, with respect to their philanthropic work, I think is really innovative, really exciting, making big bets about how to change knowledge, um, big bets around the future of technology. And I think that there's a lot of leaps of faith that are evident in their approach. And I think that's really meaningful. So that's specific to philanthropy. When it comes to families with large operating businesses, I think that those that focus on doing the really often not publicly recognized work of making the necessary retrofits or pursuing a net zero strategy. This work doesn't lend itself always to external comprehension because it might be buried in the balance sheets, it might be highly technical, but it matters. And we hear families talk with genuine passion about a decision to take certain measures at their factories or on their ships that can drastically increase the sustainability of their operations, and it's not ever gonna show up in a newspaper. It's not gonna be on the side of a building. It can be completely invisible work, but it's still work that matters, and they're genuinely proud of it. And so I sort of wanna give a shout out to those families who might be building legacy in ways that aren't publicly accessible. And then for families who have an investment portfolio or who have a family office, I mean, the hardest question there is, I think, can they get beyond loss aversion? Can they start to build a legacy by engaging in forms of concessional financing? Can they sacrifice the top risk-adjusted market rate return? Can they leave some money on the table in order to build out you know, the the sort of business case for a blended financing model or engage in catalytic investing and really help to build the future, even though it flies in the face of that loss aversion that I mentioned. So I think that there's absolutely exciting opportunities for legacy, but it requires grappling with big issues around public recognition or lack thereof, and ability to withstand public criticism, because families tend to be criticized even if they're doing the right thing. They perhaps aren't doing enough of it, or they haven't done it soon enough. So it's not easy to try and build a legacy in the face of a public that has their own really valid reasons for being critical.
It's very interesting what you said, Bridget. I think that according to the family business that I've investigated, there is a very big difference between the multi-generational ones that are already like Gen 5, Gen 6, where the topic of legacy is part of the family discourse. So the next generation is grows up with this concept of having a legacy to bring forward, having a legacy to be custodian of. And sometimes they also feel like constrained by that. it's a burden that they need to carry on, and some of them really feel like it is a cage from which to, like a golden cage from which they want to escape from. And for others, they feel like if I stay in this family, it means that nothing can change because it's just, we have always done like that. There is this strong past of iconic figures that we need to cherish. And so there is this immobilism of not being able to evolve. So they prefer to launch other businesses or work in other companies rather than serve the family business. And I don't use this word, I use this word with real meaning of it. For younger, like less generation of involvement, family business, legacy is something that has not been developed yet. Maybe there is an iconic founder that has been able to develop the business, so it is a figure that they are kind of proud of or grateful for. But at the same time, there is not this element of assets, physical and symbolic assets. They link so much. So here I understand what Bridget said, that it's something that comes later in the individual life stage, because legacy becomes an instrument to be immortal. So it's a way through which the entrepreneur, for instance, want to perpetuate him or herself beyond the death. And so they are kind of creating this symbolic legacy that will last beyond their life. So this tension, in any case, can have a strong influence of next generation. So while also in the literature we always put a lot of emphasis on the positive side of legacy, we need to be also aware about its dark side and how to balance the two. Because we always ask family business to be able to innovate, evolve, and change. And on the other side, we always cherish them for being attached to their roots, to their tradition, and for their legacy. So this is a tension that needs to be managed, and that for next generation can be a strong burden to bring.
That's wonderful. I think we covered a lot of ground today, and I'm really looking forward to more conversations with both of you in the new year. Again, thank you to Alfred Damasis, our good friend, and of course one of the most accomplished academics and researchers in the world in general, but particularly in this sphere. It was wonderful to have his support to bring us together. And Emanuela, thank you for joining today and bring your wisdom from your world and also your involvement in FBN and the International Family Research Academy. And Bridget also from Oxford and the Evolving Ownership Project 2.0, and to bring both of your accomplishments today to this platform is wonderful, especially as we finish the year and think of the contemplation that we all do at this time. And as we're talking now, thinking ahead to the ways to build legacy and also preserve and empower that with our friends and clients. So that's wonderful. So thank you for joining today, Emanuela and Bridget.
Thanks a lot, Adam, for hosting us. And thank you, Bridget. I always learn so much when I listen to you. So it was great to share this stage with both of you. Thanks a lot.
Same. This was great. Thank you, everyone. What a pleasure. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to everybody. I want to thank you again and the attendees today on the Family Business. This is Adam Smith signing off. Please stay tuned for the next episode on